here today. It's our next to last Sunday in our series called We Can Do More Together. And just as a quick reminder, since we weren't able to get together last week because of the snow, this statement, this sentence is meant to inspire us. We can do more together. If we just said we can do more, there's a sense of guilt, a sense of resentment, all of that stuff that begins to form inside of us because we're already kind of tapped out with where we are. And so when somebody says, hey, you can do more, it's like your boss saying, I'm not going to give you a raise or treat you any better, but do more, be more productive. And I think that's like just modern day slavery, if you want to call it that. But in a church, God put us in this place together so that we could do more together. And today we're going to talk about this idea that we can grow more together. We can grow more together. Now, what we're doing today is I'm going to tell you why you should be involved in a life group. And the reason why is because I think as a church, if we want to fulfill the mission that Jesus gave us, we have to be growing into that mission, especially at Liverpool Christian Church, where many of the people who attend this church don't have much of a church background, and so there's not like this big giant foundation that you've been building for 20 or 30 years to grow more and to be obedient to Jesus. So today we're going to talk about this idea of life groups. Now, I always want to know why we do a thing that we do. And so our motivating factor comes from Acts chapter 2, verses 42 through 47. You can look at that in the YouVersion Bible app, or you can just follow along with me as I read it. I want to share it with you because this is what the first church was doing. Now, in Acts chapter 1 and chapter 2, Jesus has died, he has risen, he has appeared to several hundreds of people, and now he's gone back up into heaven. And so the disciples that Jesus left behind of the 12 are beginning to start the first century church. And so in Acts chapter 2, 3,000 people are baptized, but then what do they do with their life after that? That's found in Acts 2:42. It says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. So this is a different time, right? When this was written, it's a different time. It's a different kind of community. But a life group is our 21st century response to what the first church is doing, to what the early church is doing. So we're not going to all meet together every single day and hang out for 9 hours, eating bread and drinking wine and just, hey, what's up? What's going on? So our response is a little bit different than that. Our response is what we call life groups. Now, in life groups, you can fulfill Jesus' command to love one another and to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, I want to point out, when Jesus says to love your neighbor as yourself, he's not just talking about the people that live next door to you, and he's not just talking about the people that you like. Now, it's really easy to love the people that we like because we want to be around them, but Jesus is saying love everyone, love your neighbor, meaning anyone that you come across as yourself. And there's literally no boundaries on who we are supposed to love except for everyone. That's the only rule. Love everyone. Now, when you hear the word life groups and you hear groups and things like that, certain people have certain things that pop up into their mind. Some of you get... I learned a word when I moved to Syracuse. Agita. You guys know that word? It's like an old school Italian thing. It's like, it's in your belly, and I don't want to do it. And that's like what's going on with agita. So I want to invite up some normal people. All right, I want to show you normal people. So Kate, Dan, Encarnacion, that's how you say that. Allie, Dan, yeah, come on up. Don't hesitate. I'm called your name. Get up. Yeah, do that because it makes it less awkward. Go over there. Got this on, Stevie? Who else was it? Jonathan. Why aren't you get up here? You know what you're doing. I forgot. So these are look. These people all look normal, with the exception maybe of Jonathan over there. Just kidding. Just kidding. Love Jonathan to death. Right? These people look normal, right? Like it could be any of you up here. And so all of these people were involved in life groups. And so what I wanted to do with them was ask them some questions that maybe you might have had about life groups and see what other normal people say. Because pastor's supposed to say it. Pastor's supposed to be the one, everybody should do life groups and everything will be great and Jesus will love you more. Like, that's what I'm supposed to do, you know what I mean? So I wanted to hear from normal people. So were any of you like hesitant to sign up for a group and would say that? You don't have to be first, I just handed it to you, but it could be. Who was hesitant or nervous to sign up for a life group? Okay, this is Dan, by the way.
Dan. Okay, so I would say, yeah, I was a little bit nervous because I joined a group that I never met the people that were hosting the group in church. I had passed by them and I was just winging it, and I'm definitely nervous about just going into a stranger's house and talking about personal stuff. And it totally was not that way. It was a lot of fun, and it was good to grow closer to people other than just ones that we passed by in the hall or passed by at the coffee bar.
Yeah. So that's pass that. Give that to Kate, because I know Kate is an introverted type person, right? So she likes when I point that out. So you were nervous when you joined it first, and Dan, you were nervous when you joined it first, and then because your description of that is like, I'm going to go to a stranger's house and tell them my secrets, which is a little bit maybe not exactly what happens in a group, and so the nerves got subsided pretty quickly, right, when you went there. Yep. Kate, you've been a Christian for a while now, forever. Okay. So when you think about life groups, what kind of impact does a life group have on you? I mean, you've been a Christian for a long time. You love Jesus. When you go to a life group, what is the impact that happens in your life?
So, sorry, just kidding. This is why I always say no to these things. So I have a tendency, and I'm sure that most of you do too, to like show up on Sunday morning, do your due diligence, go home and move on with your life. And life group kind of forces you to take what you've learned and digest it. You're talking over with other people, you're forming community, you're just taking it and bringing it home and applying it to your life.
Okay, so it helps you with making it tangible.
Correct.
Yeah. So Ed and Christina, what happens in this is Ed and Christina. What happens in a life group? If someone signs up for a life group and they show up to a life group, what can they generally expect to happen?
I think open arms is the first thing you're going to get. I think a lot of people go into life groups and you meet some people for the first time. And it's usually a group that you've signed up for because you think you might have something in common with the people, or you're just like, I just want to get out there and get to know my community. And so you're immediately welcomed with just open arms and warm hearts, and everyone's just accepting to learn more about you and discuss what we talked about on Sunday. It's a great way to delve into doing more. And so we come in here for an hour on Sunday, but being able to take it and dive more into what we learn and open up and talk about it and how it relates to you is such a great welcoming feeling. So you build a sense of community with the people that you're around. Cool.
Hand that to Allison and Aria. Did you? Oh, I'm sorry. He's a trophy husband. I mean, look at him. Of course he is.
Not gonna let that one.
I can't dig my way out of that. Allie, why did you decide to join a life group?
I had some people that I was already starting to form connections with at the church, and they encouraged me to, and Wayne pretty much makes it mandatory. He says, there's no excuse, you have to go, and there really isn't an excuse, because they have life group almost every night of the week, and this past session, they even had it on a Sunday, so I'm busy with my kids. We're at dance. We have a lot going on after the school day's over. And with my crazy hectic life, there's always a time that works for me, always. So there's really no excuse.
Cool. Can you hand that to Jonathan? Can you come over here a little bit for me, Jonathan?
Oh.
We rehearsed all of it. Jonathan, so you moved here from Michigan, which is a terrible place to live. The Detroit Lions. I mean, come on. And so when you were new here, when I found out that you signed up for your first life group, I was really shocked because like you're a young guy and you were new, and so I kind of expect that kind of person to be very, very slow in jumping in and getting going and things like that. But you've been since you came here, you've been in groups and you've been doing other kind of things like that. For you personally, why was it a good decision for you to do this?
Well, so when I moved here from Michigan, I didn't know anyone. You know, even at work, the people that I work with were all over the country, so there wasn't anyone local I worked with. So, like my day is I'd wake up, I'd go to work, and I'd come back, and I'd have almost like no human interaction. And repeat this for a few months, and eventually, you know, I was just feeling like lost and lonely. And then I remember, like, I eventually decided to go to a church because, you know, I guess my personality, I'm not the kind of person who would normally like go out and do things to meet people.
Right.
So I came to the church, and it just so happened that the first Sunday that I showed up was the first week of life groups.
Oh, nice.
So I believe you gave a sermon about life groups, and then well, first of all, I was welcomed into the church with open arms. I was initially nervous because, like, going to a church where I don't know anyone, you know, like that's still
it's difficult. It's very hard. So you've been involved in it since then, but why was it really good for you?
Well. Right. So that first week I went to my first life group, which I believe was the Hazards, and then just like immediately I felt like I had a new group of a dozen friends. You know, it filled that hole in my heart. Yeah,
that loneliness just evaporated.
Exactly. Yeah, just immediately.
Awesome. Can you guys give a hand to our people? So, in case you didn't understand what Jonathan was saying, if you're new here, you have to sign up for a life group. That's what I heard him say. So I want to say we can grow more together. We can grow more together in life groups. And everyone who's been involved in a life group, I think, can attest to that. Now, that doesn't mean that there hasn't been people who it just didn't land with, and that's fine. It's not going to land with every single person, but my encouragement is to give it a shot. We can grow more together when we're in life groups together. But how do we grow when we're in life groups? I want to talk about a few ways that we grow. The first way that we grow is in wisdom. We grow in wisdom together when we are in a life group. Now, I say that wisdom is the application of knowledge, meaning that it's putting into practice what you know to be true. The Bible also talks about this. Look at this passage from Proverbs chapter 2. He says, "Wisdom will save you from the ways of wicked men, from men whose words are perverse, who have left the straight paths to walk in dark ways, who delight in doing wrong and rejoice in the perverseness of evil, whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways." Wisdom will save you from those kind of people, and wisdom will stop you from becoming those kinds of people. Now, let's be honest about something. There is a tension that we struggle with in life between our own desires for sinful behavior, our own sinful desires, and what God desires for my life. Now, this is a lighter. Hopefully it works. Okay, there we go. Good. So this is my grand illustration for today. All right. Now, sin would tell me, hey, that flame is beautiful. I want to touch that. I want to touch that flame. Knowledge would tell me it's going to burn you. If you touch that flame, it's going to burn you. Wisdom is saying, I want to touch that flame, but because I know it will burn me, I'm not going to do it. All right, so this is how wisdom works. I know that that thing will burn me, so I am not going to touch that thing. Wisdom saves you from the problems that you could find yourself in. Listen, understand this. Wisdom is when your knowledge equals the best action. Wisdom is when your knowledge equals the best action. We can grow in wisdom together. I understand. Listen, I'm not getting nothing from you guys right now. Meaning that you probably think this is boring. Like, and okay, I'll be honest, wisdom is kind of a boring thing. But you know what's not boring? Not burning your hand off because of something like that, right? We need to understand wisdom is when your knowledge equals the best action. Now, I think that wisdom comes from two main sources. The first source that I believe wisdom comes from is the mistakes that you make. You learn from the mistakes you make. The second source of wisdom is the mistakes of other people. Now, truthfully and ideally, we would read God's word and we would learn from the things in God's word and we would never make the mistake in the first place. But honestly, we are far too stubborn to learn something that easily. It's almost like we have to get hit in the head to learn that getting hit in the head is not a good thing. You understand what I mean? So wisdom is us learning something and putting that thing into practice. Now, when we're growing in wisdom, we are by default growing in obedience to Jesus. When we're growing in wisdom, we are by default growing in obedience to Jesus. So in a life group, we can grow in obedience together. Look at these passages about obedience. 1 John 5:3 says, "This is love for God, to keep his commands." John 14:15, this is Jesus, "If you love me, keep my commands." 2 John 6 says, "This is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands." Obedience, to me, it seems, it's the practice of wisdom. We get wisdom, we start living that out, and that happens through obedience. And so obedience is the practice of wisdom. God says this thing, I will do that thing. That's obedience. God says this, I will do that. So how does that happen? It only happens through obedience. Now, obedience is never a problem until it rubs up against what I want to do in my own life. Obedience is like, well, yeah, we should definitely be obedient to God. Until, and we're really good at telling other people they should be obedient to God. The problem is when it rubs up against what I want. Now, in a life group, you have people who have, quote, been there and done that. You know, I think there was a rap song about that. You got guns, I got strapped. Okay, nobody? Okay.
No.
Not a gangster rap crowd. Okay, well, now I know. Being obedient to God is a great thing for us to do. Now, a lot of people say, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to listen to God, what God says. I don't want to be obedient to him because it's going to lead me to a lifeless life. Being obedient to God will lead me to, it'll be boring. I won't have a life. I won't have a life if I try to be obedient to God. But I think it's the opposite of that. Because being obedient to God, growing in wisdom and being obedient to God, it gives you an idea of what your boundaries are in life. Okay? So let's imagine let's imagine that life is a basketball court. Okay? And the basketball court has out of bounds, right? And so when we're obedient to Jesus, we know that if I cross that line, I'm going to be out of bounds. I'm going to be outside of what God wants for my life. I'm not going to be obedient to him if I cross that line. But anywhere else inside that court, I am free to go and free to roam. That's what it is when we're obedient to Jesus. When we understand the boundaries that Jesus has set up for us, we have freedom to run all around and do whatever we want inside of that with God's protection and God's provision. That's how he does it. God protects us and provides for us inside of the boundaries of what he wants for us. This is obedience. Listen, when you're growing in obedience with a life group, you are growing individually and your family is growing as well. A life group celebrates with you when you win, and a life group encourages you when you lose. This celebration when you win, this encouragement when you lose, this is called accountability. In a life group, we can grow in accountability together. Accountability is a very, very simple thing. Accountability is when someone shows up in your life and says, hey, how's it going with that thing that we talked about the other day? What's going on in your life? Are you struggling? Can I pray for you? What temptations are you having to deal with? What happened? How can I help? How can I pray for you? This is accountability. It's someone showing up in your life to help you be obedient to Jesus. And it's you showing up in someone's life to help them be obedient to Jesus, to live in wisdom. This happens in life groups. When the been there, done that people can tell you how to not go there or do that. This is us growing in accountability. Accountability is very important because when we are accountable to someone else, we become much stronger. We become much stronger. Look at this passage from Ecclesiastes. He says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. The cord of 3 strands is a great picture of accountability. We can become, just like Jonathan mentioned, he didn't know anybody, and all of a sudden he's got a dozen people in his life who can help him be accountable if he chooses to invite them into that. Jesus wants us to be accountable because when we're accountable to other people, when we're accountable through a life group, we grow in power. We grow in power together in life groups. Power to defeat sin in our lives. Power to overcome struggle. Power to preach Jesus with our lives. Power to win friends to Jesus. Power to love people over hating them. Power to be gracious over harsh. Power to live for God's glory. And to make Jesus famous in this world. We can live a life of power. And one of the things that really stands out to me when I think about power is that power does not necessarily mean you're the Kool-Aid man in every situation that you find yourself. You understand what I'm saying? Like you burst into a room with all of your opinions and thoughts, and I'm going to tell everybody what I think, and you're going to know what I think. Now, I'm detouring because I'm a little bit pissed off right now at the Christian reaction to New York State's new abortion law. I'm going to be blunt. I don't like abortion. I hate it. I think it's a terrible thing to have to deal with. But I am not a woman who has ever dealt with that. Now, there are ways to say you don't support something without being a tool on social media or just posting article after article after article that you haven't read. So I read the bill, and I'll be honest with you, I thought that was already legal in New York. As Christian people living in power, sometimes the power is in the restraint that you need to show. Still, it's 2019. Not one person out of the 7 billion people on this planet has changed their mind because of your Facebook post. But you have, and Christians have, validated what people already thought about Christianity. That it is a hypocritical, judgmental place. And I'll tell you, in a life group, you can discuss these opinions. You can talk about what you think and what you feel. You can get out your first reaction in a safe place and then go and live out the better reaction with people. If you are a woman in this room who has had to make the decision to have an abortion, please know Jesus still loves you. He has never stopped loving you. He will always love you. And if you can't have that as the basis for whatever you say to someone about this topic, then don't say a damn word. I'm serious. But we can grow in power. To get back to my point. We can grow in power. We can grow in the power that Jesus wants us to have. And I want to give you an example of the kind of power that God wants us to have. In the book of Daniel, there's a story about three men named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Anybody ever heard of those three dudes? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This is the kind of power that Jesus wants us to have in Daniel chapter 3. Now, here, let me give you a little backstory to what's going on there. King Nebuchadnezzar is full of himself. He's all full of himself. He's a lot like me. Really handsome, full of himself, can't stop talking, whatever. But King Nebuchadnezzar decides that he's going to build all these altars and all these statues made of gold, and he's going to force his kingdom to bow down and worship him every time these musical instruments start to play. And he makes this declaration: every time these instruments play, if you don't bow down and worship the statue or the images or me, guess what? I got a furnace and I'm going to throw you in it. I'm going to throw you and whoever's not worshiping me in that fire. And so the time comes where this is about to happen. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, imagine they're standing in a crowd of people and they're just talking like out in this, like at Walmart or whatever, just hanging out, looking at, the clearance Christmas decorations or whatever they're doing. And the music plays, and everybody else bows down and starts worshiping the statue. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego say, no, we're not doing that. Not doing that. I'm not going to bow down and worship the statue. Well, King Nebuchadnezzar finds out about this, and he has them brought in front of him, and he tells them, listen, dude, I told you, if you don't bow down and worship me when the music plays, I'm going to throw you in the furnace. And he says, all right, so let's try it again. Here comes the music. And then they say, no, we're not doing that. And this is their response to King Nebuchadnezzar in the face of death, with the whole nation looking at them. This is the power that they share. In Daniel 3, verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. Okay, let me say something about that really quick. A lot of times there's things going on in your life and people are saying stuff about you. Here's a sentence for you. We do not need to defend ourselves in front of you in this matter. So maybe when everybody's you just go, I'm not dealing with that crap. I'm not answering that. We do not need to deal with you. We do not need to answer you concerning this matter. This is what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego says, because they know they're answering to God. We do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But, this is the power, but even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. This is sheer power coming off of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. God will save us, but even if he doesn't, we're not going to bow down and worship these idols. So as the story goes, Nebuchadnezzar is super mad. He heats the fire up 7 times more. He orders Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to be thrown into the fire. The guys who throw them into the fire die because the fire is so hot. And then King Nebuchadnezzar goes, wait. And he's looking into the furnace, and he sees 4 people walking around in the furnace, but 3 people were thrown in there. An angel from God came down and protected him in the fire. And he says, hey, what is going on in there? Come out. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walk out of the fire, and the Bible says that their robes weren't scorched and they didn't even have the smell of smoke on them. And here's King Nebuchadnezzar's response to that. Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own. That is power. And that is the kind of power that comes from being a cord of 3 strands. That is the kind of power that comes from being together and growing with other people in a life group. Now, here's what I would have you do, because I just preached a great sermon. Pull out your phone, go to liverpoolfamily.com. It's the first thing at the top of the page, and you can sign up for a life group today. I know we have groups on Sunday night. I am doing a new believers group, so if you're new to this whole Christianity thing, or fairly new to it, I'd love to have you come be in my group, and I'll indoctrinate you, and we'll turn this thing into a straight-up cult. All right? I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. But I would love to have you be a part of that group. So at liverpoolfamily.com, you can sign up for a life group. I would encourage you to do that today. Don't wait around. Don't make an excuse. Come and feel the power and growth that you can have by aligning yourself in a life group, by doing life with other people. Let's stand.